Hi there, welcome back to Built Not Bought by Bruce, or welcome to Built Not Bought by Bruce. I thought I could give you an update on the front end. Plans at this point, the front end's come together real well on the Sportster here. My intent is once I have this together, the front end will come off as a unit. I'm not going to have to take all the pieces apart on it again. So that's kind of where I'm going with the front end. It'll be the last thing to come off before paint and probably the first thing to go on. So I just thought we could talk about some of the changes that I've made. We can start, I guess, at the bottom. And if we start right at the bottom, tires on this bike are fine. They're maybe getting a little bit old. I'm going to see how they work once I get it on the road again. But there's certainly lots of tread, no issues, no cracking, nothing. So I'm thinking we're pretty good with the tires. The rims, these are the same spoked rims. I like spokes. Rims are in great shape, no issues. Alfred spent some time cleaning up the hubs and everything real well here. So the rim has cleaned up very nicely. The wheel assembly is real good. One thing that we did do is I've changed the rotors. Now the front and back rotor match. They're the same. Initially they weren't the same on the bike, which was always kind of a stickler for me, but now we've got new rotors on there, or discs. I guess I'm talking car speak there. We have new discs on. They match, they're good, they're drilled, they look great with the spokes. Everything is good there. The axle on the Sportster, if you're familiar with the stock axle, and this is a 96, so I don't know how many years that we did that. But with the axle, it feeds through from this side, and what you're left with, and I've got a picture I can drop in the video here. There's a nub that sticks out with a hole in it, and the hole, I take it, is designed to put a bar in so that when you need to undo the nut on the other side, you can hold the axle, and then I guess it would also aid pulling it out of there. There is a locking bolt down here to lock the axle in on this side, which, there's no problem there. So what I did is when I put it back together initially here, I looked at it, I put a pike nut on the other side. That looked great. I looked at this side. It wasn't symmetrical. It didn't look right. This wasn't very nice. It wasn't polished. The little stub of the axle sticking out. So I ran it down to Precision Frameworks, and the guys down there threw it in the lathe, machined this side off at the end of the hole, if you will, and then drilled the axle, threaded it the same as the other side, 1/2 inch National Fine, threaded it for a stud. We put a stud in it, and that way we're able to put a pike nut on this side as well. So now there's a pike nut on both sides. I think it looks great, balanced it out. And what I did here for the locking bolt on the fork is I got a chrome Allen head fastener, polished chrome. It's a Colony Machine piece that I got from Lowbrow, and put a pike nut on the back side just to stick with that same theme with the pike nuts. It's a little unbalanced that way. It's asymmetrical. There isn't one of these on the other side, but there's a brake on the other side that isn't on this side, so I can live with it. It'll be all right. I guess the next thing is to move to the brake, and I'm just going to try and show you on the other camera and still talk to you over here. So on the brake, I took the caliper, bead blasted it, got it all cleaned up, then polished it. Got to tell you, that's a pile of work, but I'm really happy with the result. So I've got a polished caliper there now. We're not quite totally back together. I've got new pads and stuff. I'm just waiting on a couple pieces to come in, like bleeder screws. Once I have all the pieces, I will go ahead and rebuild the caliper, and then it's done and out of the way. The other thing we're going to change here is the brake hose. So I've just got it hanging here for now. This black hose doesn't go with my build at all, and once it's painted, I just have a feeling this is really going to stick out. So what I'm going to do there is run a probably stainless steel braid. That's probably what I'm going to go with. I've looked for brass braided. Nobody does that. There is copper out there, but nobody does brass. And the brass highlights on this bike, it would tie in. But you know what? Braided stainless will look just fine on it. No issues there at all. I should mention too, all new bearings. Everything's been changed. The way I look at this is, once you've taken it down to this point, why not put the new pieces in and just know that everything is really good. So we've polished the caliper. That looks great. We're going to rebuild that. Moving on to the lower fork legs, which have a little dust on them right now. Moving on to the lower fork legs. When I got this bike and when we took it apart, previously somebody had cut the mounts for the fender off. I don't have a problem with that because I don't run a front fender. I'm good with no fender. But they had cut it off, and I'm going to guess that they really didn't have the right machine or the right tools to get it smooth. I'll be honest with you, these can be a bit of a challenge. And I'm even going to tell you that if you feel around this, it is not perfectly round. There is some deviation in it. But that's because I do everything here on my bench grinder with my multi-tool belt attachment. So that's how I get it all smoothed out. With it polished up, it looks great. I don't think anybody is going to come over and say, oh, well, that's not quite perfectly round. And if they do, I'm probably going to ask them just step away from the bike and leave me alone. But anyway, I guess if you had a lathe, something like that, maybe you could secure this in a lathe and really make sure you got this straight. But, on the other side, you have to deal with the mount for the brake caliper anyway. So really, I think as long as you can get it real good by hand, you're probably in pretty good shape. So I got it all smoothed out, then polished it. I'm really happy with it. There are probably some guys who can polish better than I can, and maybe somebody would spend more time on it than I have. I've got a fair amount of time invested. I think it looks good, so I'm going to run with it the way it is. Inside the lower fork legs, we did all new bushings, new seals, full kits, brand new AMSOIL synthetic fork oil. Everything's good that way. That's all taken care of. The other thing we did is, earlier I debated Springer, what was I going to do with the front end? And a guy by the name of Robert, he sent me a message on YouTube there and said, hey, why not just put a lowering kit in there and lower that thing down a little bit? And I thought, wow, that's kind of a cool idea. So I went with a progressive suspension kit. Progressive suspension comes with 2 springs, a heavier and a lighter, and it also comes with a spacer that is made from space-age polymers, or what we commonly call plastic. Plastic tubes, you cut these spacer tubes to the length that you need, and how much you cut off determines how much it lowers the bike. Cutting those tubes, and a little tip for you, Brent, good old Brent over at Precision Motorcycles, and not that Brent is old, he's just experienced, so that's why I call him good old Brent. Brent said, I said, hey, can I bring this down and can you cut it on the lathe for me? And he said, why don't you just use a tubing cutter? And sure enough, I went out and bought myself a decent quality tubing cutter. Those white plastic tubes, I was able to get a real accurate cut, real nice cut, didn't need any cleanup at all on it or anything, really worked well. So thanks Brent for recommending that. So on this, I went with the 1-inch drop, the first step, if you will. I thought, you know, I'm going to sneak up on this. I don't want to just jump in and wind up with the thing too low and then have to order new spacers or whatever. So I just went with the first recommended cut, and you know what? Turned out perfect. That was exactly what I needed. I've got this jack under the bike right now just for stability. However, I've had the bike down on the ground. I think I have a picture I can post for you. Had to get a new kickstand. Was never happy with the kickstand it had because I always felt like the bike was too upright, and I thought, geez, if somebody just bumps, you know, the end of the handlebar at a show or something, this thing could go over the wrong way. I never felt real good about it. So Lowbrow has a nice chrome 1 inch shorter kickstand for the Sportster. You know, goes right on the factory mount, no problem, real good. So I bought one of those, and now with the front end lowered, the frame rails are parallel to the ground. The bottom of the frame looks really good when it's sitting there. And with the shorter stand, it's got a little more lean. I feel a lot more secure about the way it sits when it's on the kickstand. So that worked out really, really well. That is the suspension. Up here, the triple trees, again, we did some polishing. You may have seen my video on the internal fork stop. I got rid of that big tab that stuck out here for the padlock setup for the front end. Now it's got an internal fork stop. That got rid of the big bump on the front of the frame and everything else. And of course, spent some time polishing up the triple trees. Worked out really nice when the guys set up did the machining for the internal fork stop for me. They also machined that off, machined a couple bumps off of here. It was easy for me to polish it up. It looks great, it's smooth, very happy with it. Top triple tree clamp is stock, it's fine, polished up real nice, no issues there. On the triple trees, we're also using Pike Nuts. All I'm doing with all of this Pike Nut stuff is I'm just making studs from threaded rod. You can use stainless, or you can use grade 8 threaded rod, grade 5 threaded rod, whatever you want. I went with the grade 8 CAD plated threaded rod for most of this. I've got some stainless steel, but I find, correct me if I'm wrong guys, but I find stainless sometimes is a little soft. I feel more secure about the grade 8 stuff. And Alfred is a wizard at making studs for me now. Does a great job. You can finish them off, finish off the ends with a file, which is typically the way Alfred does it. I'm a little more impatient than that, so I tend to go over the bench grinder and just zip the end. But you just want to clean up the end. The rethreading kit helps to run the die over it just to make sure that those threads are cleaned out where you've cut it. But easy deal. We went with a Drag Specialties. Sorry about that. Went with a Drag Specialties headlight. The mount for the headlight is it's a chrome piece from Lowbrow. Very nice piece. It is the same shape and mount as the original Sportster one. So the original Sportster one is, I have to get this right, what they would call a top mount headlight. So the mount is at the top of the headlight, goes in here. This is a 1/2 inch bolt on the stock one. And that bolt's on here. So I looked at the original headlight pot, wasn't really happy with the holes in it, and I thought, okay, I could weld that up, I could modify it, then I could take it, get it chromed. You know what, by the time you put all that effort into it and everything and pay for plating, this headlight was like 80 bucks Canadian with a bulb, H4 bulb. Why would you go any other way? But here's what we ran into that you might want to know about is most of the top mount headlights will come with a 1/2 inch bolt because they're intended for this kind of setup. This is actually a bottom mount headlight, which means this is supposed to be at the bottom. Now, it works out great because you flip it over, the wiring's right here. That's real good. But the first one we ordered, we realized there was a problem because this retaining ring that has a split in it, of course, to release the headlight, this retaining ring had the split up here and it attached to the housing. So you couldn't spin it 180 degrees. And when we took it out and looked at it, and I saw this, you know, the bolt sticking or screw sticking through here, and I thought, I don't want all of that right up at the front. So we went back, we looked in the catalog, we wound up getting this one, this Drag Specialties unit, and the reason we went with this is this ring is separate from the housing. It doesn't attach to the housing at all. So we were able to spin the ring and of course the light itself, because the light also has a top to it because of the way the reflectors work and the way it aims the light and everything. You don't want to run it with the top to the bottom or your light pattern's going to be all wrong. So with this particular light, you can turn the light 180 degrees and the retaining ring, which puts the clamp screw down at the bottom here, which I can live with. That's much nicer. It's a deeper chrome housing than the original one, but I've got room at the back here in front of the frame. No issue there. All of that worked out just fine. This light comes with really some nice chrome hardware. No issues with what they send with it. But again, I thought, you know, if I'm doing this Pike Nut thing, I need to follow through on it. Might be a little bit excessive, but you know what? It's okay. I like it. Made a stud, did Pike Nuts here, and did a Pike Nut on the top. The other thing about going with a bottom mount light and turning it around is most of the bottom mount lights seem to come with a 3/8 mount, a 3/8 threaded piece. And of course, if you have a 1/2 inch hole for the original style headlight, now you've got some slop in there. I was lucky enough, I had a piece of tubing that I was using on the race car for something. This is 1/2 inch OD, and it's just about perfectly 3/8 ID. It does have a seam in there. So all I did, I took a 3/8 drill bit, clamped this down, ran a 3/8 drill bit a couple inches down to clean out the inside, and then cut a small piece off, and hopefully I can show you this. I can't really tell. So I just cut a small piece off with a hacksaw, filed the edges to clean it up, and used it as a spacer in here. The only caution is you have to make sure that this is not as thick as your mount, because that way your light can tighten up. If this were in the way, the light would never tighten up, so it would be able to turn and stuff. So we made a couple of these. You know, when I get to putting it together here, squirt a little bit of paint on that just so it doesn't rust being in there, but it should be just fine. So that's what we've done with the headlight. The risers for the handlebars, it turned out when I got into this, I wanted to put some new bushings in there because they were pretty wiggly. I always thought they were kind of soft on this bike. Turned out that the risers were a metric piece, and they had, I don't know what the equivalent to a 3/8 is, but they had about a 3/8, so 12 mil, whatever that is, 10 mil. For bolts, that's what they had. Steve at Precision was kind of concerned. He said, man, I'd want my handlebars to have 1/2 inch bolts like they do from Harley. So we ordered up New risers, new plate for at the top here. Now I've got some serious polyurethane bushings in there. Some grade 8 bolts. I may do something, these are CAD plated. I may do something to clean those up, but they're okay. They're kind of tucked away in there, so I don't think I'm real worried about that. That got the handlebars mounted. The point I'm at now, I checked. I had some of these cool clamps from Lowbrow that I bought when they were on sale. We're going to be able to use a couple of these aluminum clamps on the clutch cable and on the brake line. And I'm just getting into the wiring, and I will do another video on wiring. There's quite a bit to talk about there. There's going to be a lot of work to rewire this for the Moto Gadget. However, it's looking good. Alfred and I figured it out here the other day. We've labeled everything, but as I say, we'll go over that later. That wraps up what I've done to the front end. And I have some other clips that I'll throw in to this video, try and show you as much as I can. I've got some time-lapse stuff I can throw in there. All in all, very happy. And what's going to be really nice, I've got new bearings. The new bearings already in on the bottom because we've got that internal fork stop, and I didn't want to have to pound a race off of there or anything like that again. So when this goes back together, new bearings, of course, we just have to put the new one in the top. The new one's already in the bottom. That wraps it up. I think that's pretty much everything I've done to the front end. Hope that gives you some ideas. Thanks for watching. If there was anything valuable here, maybe you could hit the like button. Love it if you'd subscribe. And we'll be back to you soon with more about the Sportster. Thanks.